Thanks so much for coming back to talk to me about the Caravan. So last time we talked about a jet, we're taking a couple steps down here as far as mission goes. Will you tell me what typically the Caravan's used for?
Oh man, well, what a question. I don't think that there's anything that's not typical for the Caravan to do. I mean, as they say in some of the publications, a Swiss Army knife, if you will. I've operated the airplane as a skydiving platform, a cargo platform. I've ridden on it in a passenger, in a commuter airline configuration. I've seen it configured for air ambulance, for special missions. I mean, just what an incredible tool to have that can be used for any sorts of thing. I would say typically the biggest operations are going to be passenger and cargo operations, though. I mean, ever since the airplane was designed in the late 80s and originally came out as a cargo master for the FedEx feeder operation, it has just been proven over and over and over again to be that great utility airplane. And then they put some windows in it, and now we can do self-unloading cargo as well. So those are either going to be the two big ones you'll see the Caravan in.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit about the limitations and the performance of the Caravan.
Sure. The Caravan's obviously powered by a PT6 turboprop power plant, originally with a 600 horsepower motor, and over the years it's been upgraded to 675 horsepower and then 867 shaft horsepower with the EX model that's currently out there. And then Blackhawk and Texas Turbines have both done conversions to even put more power up front. I would say with the earlier models, the power plant was a big limitation on the airplane because as much as we could stuff those airplanes full of boxes or people, the earlier engine models were just good enough, but it left some inadequacies in the airplane's performance capability. The airplane's certified to 25,000 feet, but very, very rarely do we ever get that airplane up there. Partially from a pressurization and oxygen standpoint, and also from a power output the power output of the power plant. Other than that, the airplane has had a history with icing. The airplane was originally certified with a inflatable boot leading edge system to shed ice accretion, right? It's a de-ice, not an anti-ice system. And because of the mission that the airplane was doing, I think that pilots were finding themselves in tougher weather situations than they had expected to encounter. And because of the shape of the wing and the airplane, being in icing conditions is not a good place for the Caravan to be. Consequently, we've gotten a lot more training on how to get the airplane in and out of icing safely and how to avoid icing altogether. So that would be another kind of limitation that I see about the airplane that as pilots, we just have to be more attentive to in a turboprop aircraft.
Well, how's the aircraft as far as fuel burn and range?
Yeah, great question. The airplane will do a solid 800 to 900 nautical mile mission. Fuel burn is just phenomenal. I mean, you won't find another airplane that can go quite that far on as much gas as this thing can take. I'll see about 550 pounds per hour burn on the ground and shortly after takeoff. And then once I get into cruise, it'll go down to 400 to 300 pounds per hour. So it's extremely economical. Now, granted, you're only doing 160 to 175 knots because it's a fixed wing, fixed gear airplane. And there's a lot of drag for how big the airplane is. So it's not a speed demon by any stretch of the imagination. But for how much payload you take, at that speed and fuel burn, it's a super economical regional airplane.
Amazing. Tell me about flying it. What's the pilot workload like for you in the cockpit?
Yeah, so, I've been in the airplane a lot with customers and come out of piston power plant airplanes, smaller high wing Cessnas like a 182 or 206, and hop in this massive turbine beast. And while it all looks the same, just scaled up a little bit, that power plant is a big challenge for the transition. And so you have to get used to how much rudder authority is required when that 675 or 867 shaft horsepower motor really spools up. And that catches some pilots off guard. And so we do a little bit of extra training on ground control and using some asymmetric braking and whatnot to maintain center line and something like that. Other than that, though, the airplane handles just like a high-wing Cessna. I mean, the roll rate is tremendous. Its speeds from approach to landing to takeoff are only about 10 knots higher than some of the high-performance single-engine Cessna airplanes out there already. So, and a lot of that is due to the fact that 2/3 of the trailing edge of the wing form is your flaps. I mean, these are just barn doors, right? They're great at creating extra lift. They're great at creating drag and bringing us down on the short runways and whatnot. And the flight control system is just a pleasure to have. I don't really find myself wanting a whole lot more out of that flight control system.
And what about the roominess in the cockpit?
It's by far one of my favorite cockpits, which is funny to say after all the jets that I've flown, but I have never been able to retract my seat what feels like a football field length away from the panel of the cockpit and just sit there in this glass bowl and just let the world go by at 175 knots. I mean, I've seen landscapes the likes of the Hawaiian Islands. I've been over the Rockies. I've been in the Pacific Northwest. I've done a transatlantic flight up over the North Atlantic to bring one home from Europe before, and there is just not a better view, in my opinion. The windscreen is massive. It gives you a wonderful view, and there's more room than I could ever want in the front of that airplane, just because of how wide the body is and how narrow your seat is. Even if there's somebody next to you, you've got room for, backpacks, for flotation devices, for life rafts, for snacks. I mean, there's never a need for more space in the front of that airplane.
You can stick your Yeti up there and it'll feel really comfortable with the boxes in the back, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a wonderful.
Obviously, it's very comfortable for boxes and supplies. I've worked with a couple of caravans in hurricane and earthquake relief, and we've had all sorts of supplies in caravans flying into the islands and here in Texas doing some rescue missions. But obviously, it's great for cargo. Tell me about the passenger experience in the caravan.
Yeah, so the passenger experience is a unique one in the caravan. Most people that get on the airplane think that they're getting on a larger airplane, comparatively to getting onto like a small charter, 206 or 182 that you might find in some of the islands and whatnot. Getting on an airplane, you have an air stair door that lends itself to an easy entry to the airplane from the rear of the aircraft. And then moving forward, I mean, it's a shorter cabin, right? It's certainly not ever going to be a stand-up cabin. So it's a crouch over technique. But once you get seated in one of the cabin seats, whether it's the utilitarian ones or even the executive seats that are available with the upgraded interiors, it really is just a roomy cabin all around. A lot of times you'll see a single seat on both aisles. Some of the higher density or combination seating configurations, you'll have a bench with two on one side, and that can get a little crowded, but man, every seat's got a great window. There's plenty of headroom. There's no overhead storage to worry about. It all goes underneath the seat or in the cargo bins. And being a passenger in one, I've always enjoyed it. I mean, the big windows is almost like being up in front, but great views, great ride, handles well, and it's not a bad ride at all. Yeah.
You're not one of those pilots that hates sitting in the back?
I will admit it's a different feeling, and I do find myself pushing the floorboards in as if I was trying to steer the airplane from time to time. And I always do kind of start to grip the bottom of the seat for the landing, right? I'm a little judgmental, right, having as much time as I have in the caravans, but I also have to remember that I too was once a young feathered aviator and still learning to grease my caravan landing. So I give everybody a solid pass. As long as we can walk out of the airplane with our own two legs, life is good. But the back of the caravan is almost as much fun as being up in front.
That's great. Tell me about the maintenance and the reliability. Obviously, the PT6 engine is pretty well known as one of the most reliable aircraft engines that there is. Tell me about the airframe reliability and maybe a little bit about the maintenance for the plane.
Yeah, so from my perspective, I think it's a really easy airplane to maintain. Like you said, a nearly bulletproof power plant. The PT6 has been reliable for a long, long time, which is why they still continue to put that power plant in there. And having done a little bit of work on it myself, that cowling opens up really wide and is easy to remove. So I would imagine that means that it's easier for our maintenance staff to take care of that power plant compared to other engine cowling situations. There's not a lot of moving parts in this airplane. No landing gear to worry about. It's a fixed landing gear system. All of our flight controls are mechanical cables and whatnot. There's a couple of electrical components, right, with the flap system and the lighting system, but there's really not a lot of complex systems in this airplane. Even the fuel system is primarily a gravity-fed fuel system. So there's not a lot of things that can go wrong with the airplane. And to that point, because of how well the airplane was built and designed, things that do go wrong are very easily accessible. There's panels all over this airplane for people to get into to fix servos or cranks or lighting fixtures. The cargo pods are pretty easy to get after. Even some of the most complicated pieces that are in the cabin of the airplane, if those need to be fixed, remove a couple of seats, pull up a floorboard, and it's right there. So very easy to maintain from my perspective as a pilot, not a mechanic by any stretch of the imagination, but I've seen a lot more of this airplane than I've seen of others, and I think that it would be fairly easy to maintain. For how popular the airplane is, there's a lot of OEM support. There's a lot of people out there with spares, with aftermarket products. It would astound me if someone ever told me that they got rid of a Caravan because they just simply couldn't maintain it and maintain it economically to that point. So really easy and really low budget maintenance for sure.
Okay, so best thing about a Caravan and worst thing about a Caravan.
Worst thing about a Caravan has to be self-service over-wing fueling and doing it for the first time, because unless you've been briefed, you really don't get that pilot technique of babying the fuel nozzle when you're refueling. Because of the design of the wing tank, if you're not familiar, if you open up a handle on a jet fuel hose, you are likely going to get splashed back and get your first Caravan Jet A bath. And we've all had it. So that's probably the worst thing about the airplane right now. The best thing about the airplane is, it's a joy to fly. And I have to say that my favorite flight in the airplane has to be one of the skydiving missions. When you're at 10 to 12,000 feet, got a load of people in back, and they throw open the door, things get noisy and hectic in a hurry, and everybody bails out, and just rolling that airplane over and racing them back down to earth is just it's a unique operation. And I learned a lot about flying the Caravan from that kind of an operation, but you don't get to do that and have that kind of fun with airplanes unless you get into aerobatics. And the fact that I get to do that with the Caravan was just awesome. I look forward to it every time. It was the best 2.5 minutes of every flight of every day that I was a skydiving pilot. So that's probably my number one.
That is not the answer I was expecting, but I love it. Thank you so much for all this valuable information about the Caravan.